So quicker to develop in. Yep, that's definitely a reason I give too. Rapid application development. What else do people say? Yep. Cross-platform, so it can run on Windows, it can run on Unix, the database can be different things. There's a lot of open stuff involved with ColdFusion. It follows standards in a good way, as opposed to, for .NET, where it plays really well with other Microsoft technologies, but if you need to use an Oracle database, well, not quite so easy. What other things do people say when their boss or co-workers or clients say, why are you doing this in ColdFusion? It doesn't play as well with Oracle as it plays with SQL Server. SQL Server is much more tightly integrated. You can still get it. I mean, you can still go through ODBC to do it, but there's a lot more integration with their tools and technology. So, I saw some other people had some things that had their hands raised. What other things do you guys do? Or do you? Yeah, go ahead. So easy to maintain, particularly if you've got a lot of developers coming through and need to look at the code. ColdFusion code is can be written to be very easy to read and maintain. And I don't know how many people have ever written in other languages? So about 2/3 of you, maybe. You can certainly do all the things you can do in ColdFusion you typically can do in other languages. You can do them in PHP, you can do them in .NET, you can do them in Java. And typically, the code is longer to write, and it's a little harder to understand. It's a little harder to read because there's more of it. One of the things I've studied is the psychology of programming, and one of the things that they tell you is if you can't get the code onto one screen full, it's hard to take it in because the human mind can't really, if you have several screens full of code, it's harder to debug and harder to develop with it. So the more concise you can get the code, the easier it is to take in and maintain and debug. So there is some value to having something that's concise. What other things do people do when someone challenges on you? Hey, why are you using ColdFusion? So it has a lot of features built into it. They're already configured when you install it. The email stuff is built in, the LDAP is built in, the Verity text search is built in. There's a lot of things that we don't necessarily notice that if you went to another language like PHP, you'd be installing third-party add-ons. You can still do that, but you now have to get those third-party add-ons to work. Yep. Because they have to buy another set of Visual Studio and some other tools. So the initial cost for .NET is supposedly zero, though in reality you have to buy a Windows Server license, which ain't cheap in itself. But that's often the argument I hear. .NET's free. Why should we pay for ColdFusion Server? But then what you're saying is once they've got you using the server, then they get you on the tools. So maybe when we're talking about this, we should look at the cost per developer and not the cost per server. So if you've got 5 developers, you can compare and say, oh, well, this actually works out cheaper. That's a great point. I'm sure people have done that. In fact, maybe we should do that here. You know, Maybe. So comparing the I don't know how I'm producing that sound, but comparing the speed of development in different languages, doing a kind of code off. And my feeling is just based on how much code has to be written and my own experience of writing in different languages, it is much quicker to write in ColdFusion. But you're saying it would be kind of neat to do a little public contest. So you'd like some case studies where you could point to it. Yep. I saw someone else had their hand. Right, that's a great point. That it's currently made. It's a language that's been around for a long time. It's got a long history. It's going to be around for a long time further. It's currently made by a company, Adobe, which is one of the largest software companies in the world. So that, I think, is a great argument in itself. Because I think one of the arguments used for things like .NET or Java is like, well, .NET's made by Microsoft. Well, now we can say, hey, everyone's heard of Adobe, and it ain't going away. So I think that's a great argument right there. Any other things, anyone? Yeah, go ahead. Right, so you were saying it's well integrated with other Adobe products, Flash and PDF and all kinds of other things. So that's a great point. Yeah, someone there had your hand? Maybe not. Okay. Sort of like being in an auction where you scratch your ear and you might get to win the big thing. Yeah. Mm. Mm. So, so it's so easy to learn ColdFusion that you can almost learn it by osmosis from the other developers on the team. Right. Yeah, if you already know how to program, that's true for any language, I find. Once you've learned, one language, learning a second is usually a lot easier, and learning a third is easier still. So, absolutely, if you've got someone else who's programming another language, they usually can pick it up. Though sometimes the idea that we're doing things in tags gets people a little, not maybe confused isn't the right word, but they're just not used to that syntax, and they prefer the script syntax that you can use in ColdFusion. So, which of course is always available if you prefer that. Okay, any other things anyone wants to add? Mm. Right, so the ability to work with formats that upper management are used to, like spreadsheets, like PDF, like web pages too, I guess, that's definitely an advantage of ColdFusion. Okay, well, let me talk about some of the things I saw. I think I've got some things in here that you've already mentioned, but I want to make sure I go through the slides I have here. Obviously, you've got a copy of the slides in your handout. So I think the first thing to look at is who are you talking to? Because I think there are different arguments to give depending on who you're trying to explain this to. Are you trying to explain it to your CIO. You can try and explain it to other developers. Maybe it's end users. And I think there's a little different tack there because other developers sort of understand that that it's quicker to code in or it's easy to code in. On the other hand, sometimes other developers code in their language like it was a religion, and their firstborn child will have to be sacrificed if they ever change languages. So sometimes it doesn't matter what you tell other developers. If they're like a PHP developer and PHP is wonderful, like they ain't changing. So you may not be able to convince them to change, but perhaps you can convince them what you're doing is okay. I think with end users, generally my experience with end users is they don't really care what language you write the application in. They care, is it a good application? Does it work? Is it bug-free? And is the company that makes it going to be around later? Maybe they care a little bit about that. So I've never found end users being particularly hard. If you think this is the language to develop it in, it's going to make a great product and they'll be happy, fine. CIOs, does anyone here deal with CIOs about this question? Or is anyone here a CIO? Yeah. They're taking more enterprise considerations into account. Maybe they've got a policy that says all the applications have to be done a certain way. And if they're saying everything has to be done in Java, and we're a Java thing, shop, well, certainly ColdFusion compiles into Java. In fact, you can deploy it basically as a jar file. So that's one argument I've used there. Also, I think the rapid application development goes down well with CIOs. Often they have a backlog of projects that they need to do, and doing stuff this way. And then the other thing I've seen at a lot of organizations is, well, maybe they do have a policy that everything is done in Java or .NET or whatever, but when it comes to your department, you can sneak in a ColdFusion server and set it up so easily. Before you know it, you're running ColdFusion, and it's kind of ignoring the policy. So I've seen that happen. And then, of course, that expands out into all these useful apps, and before you know it, you're doing a lot of ColdFusion. So think about who your audience is before you're trying to convince them. I listed out some platforms that compete: ASP, traditional ASP, ASP.NET, Java, Ruby on Rails, Perl, PHP. Any other platforms anyone has ever gone up against with ColdFusion, or been told you should develop in some other language? Oh, that pretty much covers it then. So here are the things I put down for why I think ColdFusion is a great development platform and the twos. And we've certainly mentioned a lot of these. Rapid application development, very easy to learn. Powerful, there's a lot of tags built into ColdFusion, a lot of functions. One thing we didn't mention, ColdFusion is easy to scale. As long as you write your code right, and particularly the database code, it's very easy to scale it up to thousands of users. Also mentioned it's standards-based. And if there's something it doesn't do that you need it to do, what are ways we can extend ColdFusion? How can you extend? Anyone here extended ColdFusion to do something it didn't do out of the box? Custom tags. Has anyone here written a custom tag? Yeah, a few folks. They're real easy to write. You just write some code and dump it into a separate page, and then you can call it as your own tag, as though it was built into the language. Wow, how much more simpler could it be to extend out a language? Yep. Yep. You can call Java stuff real easy straight from ColdFusion. You can call COM stuff from ColdFusion. There's many ways to extend the language if it doesn't do what you need it to do. And either that's you writing that or going to a third-party library that extends it. So a lot of power in there. So let me just talk about some of these things in detail. Why is rapid application development important? Why is rapid application development? Why would anyone care? You say, oh, we do ColdFusion because it's rapid to develop in. Well, so what? Time is money. Yeah. Funny how everyone wants it done yesterday. Yeah. So rapid application development gets things done quicker, but also it lets you iterate and improve things instead of going away. I've seen some projects in Java, and they go away for 6 months, and you don't see them for you don't have any product to show, and then they come back and like, hey, we're done. But unfortunately, the patient died on the table during the operation, and the thing doesn't do quite what you want to do, and that would be real expensive to fix. Whereas with rapid development, you can show a prototype, get some feedback, and then improve it. So no, there is one caveat with doing that. If you're not too careful, you're coding so fast that the code quality can suffer. So Just make sure you're writing good code, even if it's fast code. What about easy to learn? Well, we mentioned why that's important earlier. You said it's easy to get people up to speed. What is it that makes ColdFusion easy to learn? Yep.
Something like that. One first, you know.
So it's easy to read. If you're coming from another language, it makes sense. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, it looks like HTML because it's tag-based. And also, not only can you teach an HTML person basic ColdFusion so they can do stuff, but if you give them a page with some HTML and some ColdFusion in, they are less likely to dork it up than if you give them some page that's got some .NET code interspersed with HTML. Just because of the syntax, it just makes more sense to HTML folks. How many people here actually started off doing HTML and then went into ColdFusion? Okay, it proves my point. You're now experts in ColdFusion, but you started off in HTML. So another thing I like is, you know, if you want to, I don't know how many people, I used to code in C and Visual Basic and Fortran, and there you often had to go through this compile step to produce a program. So ColdFusion, it does compile your code, but you don't have to do anything to compile it. You just put the page up there, run the URL. Behind the scenes, it gets compiled for you, does all the optimizing, everything. Anyone here used to do, you know, C code? We used to have to compile it, and yeah, it was a real pain in the butt. So all that complexity happens, but it's behind the scenes. You don't have to mess with it. And one other thing I've noticed in ColdFusion, I think the ColdFusion development team really focuses on this, is when they add new tags to the language, you know, they can add a tag with like 100 parameters to do everything, but typically they try and pick what are the default parameters that, you know, you need. What are sensible defaults? What's the least complex way we can present this tag so that beginners can use it? And then they usually have more complicated things available as options. But I think that's really important in language. Sometimes when I've gone in and looked at some .NET stuff, it's like, oh my God, you've got to like call 6 functions and do this with all these parameters and set up these objects before you can even do anything. And I know they have wizards in Visual Studio to do that, but like, wouldn't it be easier just to make it simple in the first place rather than having the wizard clean it up after? And that seems to me the approach that ColdFusion's taken. And that actually requires, on the point of view of Adobe, they're always having people saying, hey, couldn't you add this and that to the language? And it actually takes some strength to say, hey, let's keep it simple. So I just want to thank the ColdFusion team for doing that. Another thing, we mentioned it's easy to learn, but also there's a lot of learning resources out there for ColdFusion. So has anyone here used LiveDocs, for example? Okay, those of you who didn't raise your hand, go check out LiveDocs. I believe the URL is livedocs.adobe.com, or you can Google for it. What LiveDocs is, it's the whole documentation for ColdFusion, plus any user comments.
Is bad. You want to watch out for table scans.
Return type is array, like we